I'd like to call the February 8th regular meeting of the City of Post Falls Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Will you please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everybody. Again, please make sure that you silence your cell phone. If you do need to take a call, you can step out. We will go ahead and get things rolling and start with roll call.
Hampi.
Here.
Schlauhauer.
Here.
Ward.
Here.
Davis.
Here.
Kimball.
Present.
Carey.
Here.
Stephenson.
Here.
Welcome, commissioners. Ceremonies, announcements, appointments, and presentations. We have something.
Yes, today is National Boy Scouts Day. We did reach out to the Post Falls Troop 213. It had other obligations, but they are currently working on their Citizenship in the Community Award. And so they may be reaching out to some staff members to kind of fulfill that and get that Citizenship Award.
Excellent. Well, that's always nice to get them engaged. Very, very good. Amendments to the agenda this evening.
There's none.
Declaration of conflict, ex parte contacts, communication, and or site visits. Anything, commissioners?
No.
None? Okay. Then that would bring us to the consent calendar.
Yes, so item A is the minutes from the January 26, 2022 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Item B is the reason decision for the dual brand hotel special use permit, file number USE 6, 2021. And item C is the reasoned decision from the Point at Post Falls Addition subdivision, file number SUBD 18, 2021.
All right, hopefully everybody had a chance to take a look at the consent calendar. I would entertain a motion unless there's any questions.
I move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Just got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Call for a vote.
Stephenson.
Yes.
Carey.
Yes.
Kimball.
Yes.
Davis.
Yes.
Ward.
Abstain.
Schlauhauer.
Yes.
Hampi.
Yes.
Next item is citizen issues. This section of the agenda is reserved for citizens wishing to address the commission on an issue that is not on the agenda. Comments on issues that are for planned future meetings, we ask that you would hold them until then. Is there anyone that has citizen issues this evening? Okay, seeing none, I believe we have no unfinished or old business, correct?
That is correct.
All right, then this will bring us to the main portion of this evening, and that would be the first public hearing. Again, if you wish to speak at the public hearing, make sure you fill out the paperwork and turn it in up front. We will go ahead and open up Post Falls Baptist Special Use Permit.
Good evening, Commissioners. Laura Jones, Associate Planner with the City of Post Falls, introducing the Post Falls Baptist Church, Spokane Street Special Use Permit. The property owner is Post Falls Baptist Church, and the applicant is Mark Latham. The requested action tonight is special use permit approval to expand the existing church within the single-family residential R1 zoning designation. The site's located on the northeast corner of North Spokane Street and 16th, as indicated on the Vicinity map. To the north is the English Funeral Chapel CCS business. It's community commercial zoning in the red, as indicated on this map. To the east in the lighter yellow and to the south is single-family residential zoning, and that is built out with single-family homes. And lastly, to the west in the darker yellow is R2. And lastly, to the west in the darker yellow is R2 zoning, or medium density residential, and that's built out with single-family homes and duplexes. The water provider and the wastewater provider is the City of Post Falls. And again, the proposed use is expansion of the existing church. The future land use map designation is medium density residential. The character of this future land use designation states that use patterns blending commercial and residential may be considered in areas as they develop, providing they feature higher traffic volumes and/or are located and designed to function as a pedestrian-friendly focal point of the surrounding neighborhood. The existing site conditions are shown on the left side of the screen. The blue building is proposed to be retained, and the red building is proposed to be demolished. On the right side of the screen is the proposed new structure, or the expansion. So keeping that main building that's currently in use and expanding off of that. Looking at the review criteria for the special use permit, the first is that implementation of the special use will or will not conform to the purposes of the applicable zoning district. Per the Post Falls Municipal Code, Section 181610, which again is the R1 residential zone, and that zone is intended for one single-family home on one lot of minimum size or larger, and permitted other accessory uses that are associated and compatible with the residential use. Second review criteria is whether the proposed use constitutes an allowable special use as established by this chapter for the zoning district involved and complies with other applicable laws, ordinances, and regulations of the city and the state. And per Post Falls Municipal Code, Section 182030, which is the land use table, it does allow for religious institutions as an allowable special use permit within the single-family R1 zoning designation. The third review criteria is whether the proposed use will or will not be compatible with the health, safety, and welfare of the public or with land uses within the vicinity. Staff has determined that this should not be detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of the public or land uses within the vicinity. Looking at the transportation element of that review criteria, the proposed special use is not anticipated to adversely impact the adjoining transportation system. Spokane Street is a minor arterial that can allow for 6,000 to 15,000 vehicle trips per day, which it currently is well under that. The City of Post Falls, again, as earlier mentioned, will be responsible for water reclamation and domestic water, and both of the facilities have the capacity and capability of handling the proposed use. And furthermore, additional impact fees will be assessed and collected at the time of future expansion when the building permit is issued. The last review criteria is whether the proposed use will or will not comply with the goals and policies found within the comprehensive plan. Looking at this, there's 4 potentially relevant goals, goal 3, 5, 7, and 14 that are outlined in the staff report that may be applicable to this special use permit application. And there are several policies, policy 1, 3, 8, 26, 69, and 82 that are also outlined in the staff report that also may be relevant for this use permit. This is a list of the agencies that were routed for review. Of those agencies, Kootenai County Fire and Rescue just had comments that they are going to reserve their comments for the site plan review process. Post Falls Police Department was neutral. Department of Environmental Quality had no environmental impacts at this stage of the project, but are likely to have comments further along as development occurs. And then Post Falls Highway District had no comment. I can stand for any questions you have.
Questions for staff?
Go ahead.
All right. So it's R1 now. There's a church on already. You just want to expand the church. But because of the expansion, we need the special use permit, or?
The church is currently not permitted with a special use permit. It was
Okay.
pre-existing prior to
Gotcha.
our zoning. And so it's just bringing it into conformance. So
Makes sense.
basically a housekeeping ordinance.
Understood.
I guess that was my question. I was just, they wanted to change, get the special use because they're not in compliance with, in the correct zone. But On the expand, do we have any information on how they want to expand, what they want to expand, or is that supposed to be a moot point in this?
It is kind of a moot point at this point because it is just allowing the use to continue. The expansion will go through the site plan review process, and we'll look at all the elements of parking and shade tree calculations and lot coverage maximums and all of that at that time.
Okay.
Other questions? None? Okay. Laura, thank you. We'll invite the applicant up.
He's not here.
I have not seen the applicant come in.
Either have I.
Let me go to legal. With no applicant,
I mean, we could table it for further discussion later in the evening. You could also make a decision on based on the information that's in the record. It's kind of up to you.
I'm comfortable moving forward.
I agree.
Everybody else comfortable?
Yep.
Okay. Public comment?
None.
None? Okay. Then once again, we don't have an applicant, and that's okay. Commissioners, any questions for any staff before we move on?
No additional questions.
No additional questions? Everything was answered? Okay. Then we will go ahead and close it out. And let's chat about review criteria. Number one, whether implementation of special use permit would or would not conform to the proposed or the purpose of the applicable zoning district. How's everybody feel? What is the applicable zoning district?
Well, that was kind of like my question right there. It's R1, and it's
Yeah.
religious institutions are allowed with a special use permit, and that's what they're trying to do. Just a housekeeping item.
Any further comment on this side?
No, it sounds like it's been there for quite some time, being used is it at its current use, and so I don't really see any reason that we shouldn't grant it.
Okay.
I view churches a lot like schools when it comes to them being in a neighborhood. It's probably a more appropriate use to have them in a neighborhood than it would be in like a downtown district or something like that.
Okay, we'll move on to number two, whether the proposed use constitutes an allowable special use and is established by this chapter of the zoning district involved and complies with all other applicable laws, ordinances, regulations of the city and the state. Anybody want to touch base on what pertinent facts in the record indicate that this is an allowable special use permit?
I think the municipal code's pretty straightforward with regard to that. It's in the land use table as a religious institution.
Yeah.
I think that covers that.
Okay.
Agreed.
Anyone else? Okay. Let's move on to number three, whether the proposed use will or will not be compatible with the health, safety, and welfare of the public or the land use in the vicinity of the proposal. Does this use have any negative effects, characteristics that impact the health? Everybody's comfortable? What are your thoughts?
I think it's been a church since 1991. It's already been there. They're just going to expand. Obviously, they're growing, and I think it's compatible. Like kind of like what Ray said. It's in a somewhat R1, R2 area, so it's in a neighborhood. So I think it's a good fit there.
And also, we have no neighbors that came in with
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
going to say the same
anything
thing, right?
negative, so I'm assuming that it's a
Right.
good fit right now.
Okay?
I think one of the benefits of also having it in a neighborhood like that is that if the people that go to that church are local and close to it, they can walk to church most times of the year and not have to get in their cars and drive, which is one of the benefits of having it in an R1 type of a neighborhood. So it actually has less of an impact on a transportation system than it might otherwise.
Fair?
Fair.
Kevin? Ross, anything else? Okay. Number four, whether the proposed use will or will not comply with the goals and the policies found within the comprehensive plan. Any thoughts? Which goals and policies do we believe are relevant? Any additional information?
I think the staff report hits it pretty well.
Yeah.
Or it's
Yeah.
quite, it's I think the record in the staff report is pretty comprehensive when it comes to the comp plan.
Any other further thoughts?
Like goal number 7 here, supporting community needs. A lot of people like the religious institutions in your community, so I think that supports that.
Okay. Anything else to add? Anyone?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, I think we've covered everything, and unless there's any further discussion, I would entertain a motion at this time. From anyone?
I'll do it. I'll move to approve Post Falls Baptist Spokane Street Special Use Permit file number USE 00072021, adopting the findings and conclusions and conditions found in the staff report. I don't know what the condition numbers are. Were there condition numbers in here?
1 and 2.
1 and 2.
1 and 2, found in the staff report. Within R1 zoning, do we need to add that? I think it's already that.
Okay, we've got a motion.
A second.
Got a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Anyone? Okay, call for a vote.
Hampi,
Yes.
Schlaughauer.
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Kimball,
Yes.
Yes.
Stephenson.
Yes.
All right. Moving on, we will move into our second public hearing and open up the Grace Delight Special Use Permit. Ethan, take it away.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ethan Porter, one of the planners here at the City of Post Falls, here to present Grace Delight Twin Homes Special Use Permit request. The owner is Grace Delight West LLC. The applicant who's here tonight is Olson Engineering. They're requesting that approval of their special use permit for twin home developments within the community commercial services over 2.59 acres. So here you can see the project location hatched in red. It is between Mullen running east and west, Celtice running east and west, right between those, and it's east of Chase Road, which is running north and south here. So that kind of gives you an idea of where the locations are over the 3 lots there, 2.59 acres. The zoning map shows this area hatched in the black there as community commercial services, which is red. It's surrounded by community commercial services, the CCS zone. The existing use right now is vacant lots. Currently there's 3, and they are all vacant with no development on it. The water and sewer would be provided by the City of Post Falls in this location. The proposed layout that they submitted, as you can see within the staff report as well as here on the screen, is their twin home layout with their private road, parking, and their open space. I will state that the applicant and staff are aware that the layout currently does not meet bulk and placement table standards, which would be the street side setbacks on lot 1 and 12 of block 1. Currently, the applicant's aware of this. They know it does not affect the use on site at this point within this presentation, but when they move forward into subdivision, they will have to refine and reconfigure those lots around to meet those standards.
So Ethan, in essence, we're looking at a conceptual.
Correct, yes. This is a conceptual layout that will have to be redesigned to meet those standards. Correct. Looking at the review criteria for a special use permit, we look at the first one, whether or not this use will or will not conform to the purpose of the applicable zoning district. Here you can see on screen that the CCS zone supports certain residential uses through special use permit. As the table there shows, twin home row in the CCS column shows an S, meaning special use permit. So that's why you are seeing this request tonight. Looking at review criteria B, we look at whether that proposed use constitutes an allowable special use as established by this chapter for zoning district involved and complies with all other applicable laws and ordinances and regulations of the city and the state. Twin Homes does have further design standards within city code that will need to be met at the design stage for the subdivision, as well as the official bulk and placement table, as mentioned previously, they'll have to adhere to as well for those standards. Review criteria C looks at whether the proposed use will or will not be compatible with the health, safety, and welfare of the public or with land uses in the vicinity. We don't show staff has reviewed and does not show any detrimental effect of health, safety, and welfare or to the public with the land uses within this vicinity. Looking at transportation, water reclamation, and domestic water on the site, as mentioned previously, utilities would be provided by the city of Post Falls, and staff has reviewed and looked at capacity and adequate service, which both are there for the site for this particular use of Twin Homes. Transportation, like I mentioned, the Mullen and Celtice sits between two arterial roadways, and so that would accommodate and support that as well. Looking at the last review criteria, we look at the compliance with the goals and policies in the comprehensive plan. We see that goal 5, 12, and 14 are potential goals that would help you make a decision for approving or denying this. We also look at the policies as well within the comprehensive plan, being policy 1, policy 3, mainly dealing with land use patterns and development patterns. Policy 8, which is describing infill development. Policy 15, 69, and 82. You can look for more information in the staff report for those as well, if you need clarification on those or questions afterwards. Looking at the future land use map, you can see that it's the pink, which is community or commercial, business commercial. Within that, it's surrounded, that whole area is pink that you see surrounding the site hatched in black. Basically what that means is this category promotes, one thing it promotes is a mixture of moderate to high density housing types within walking distance of the city center, neighborhood center, and corridor commercial uses, as well as civic uses and other amenities within Post Falls. Going a little bit more, the principal uses and characters, as it states in the comprehensive plan, this category supports a mixture of housing types built at a moderate density, at least 8 units per net acre. The implementing zoning districts that you can see there on the bottom is R2 is listed, and R2 twin home design standards are in the official bulk and placement table as being a zoning allowing twin homes. Looking at the focus area, we look at the Celtice Central focus area. Basically, this area in the comprehensive plan delineates and encourages high-density residential uses in the area, boosting support for retail and commercial uses. And then it also says support development patterns that improve pedestrian connectivity to the commercial core of the Celtice Central context area. The agencies that were notified and routed to for responses or comments, and of those we received Kootenai County Fire and Rescue, who are reserving comments basically at the permitting and further stages in the process of development. Post Falls Police Department remained neutral, as well did Idaho Transportation Department, Department of Environmental Quality, and the Post Falls Highway District. Staff can stand for any questions you may have at this time for this special use permit request.
Commissioners, questions?
One thing staff would like to bring up, Phil just reminded me that we have a little bit of a loophole in our in our signage code, that any additional signage for the site will have to comply with the underlying zoning. Sometimes there's an argument made that because of the underlying zone, they want to put up a commercial sign for a residential product. And so any sort of signage, like a home occupation, would have to comply with the underlying zone in the signing code.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Any other questions?
So maybe we did discuss this. Can you tell me again what's on each side of that? What, it looked like there were apartments on,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Yeah, so
Preschool
the existing uses next, adjacent to it, excuse me.
Yeah, exactly.
And so here you have a 30-unit apartment complex right here to the east, directly east of the site, and then to the west, you have a playground for the daycare that's right here as well. And then you have a Cenex gas station north, and then a single-family home also north, and then Blue Dog RV is directly south of them across Silties Way. Does that help?
That does help. Would there have to be any buffer then between
Not-
like the daycare?
For the multifamily. Let's see. The multifamily, I believe there wouldn't be any regarding that, and I believe in their, yes, they do provide that. So yeah, John can correct me if wrong, but they wouldn't need a buffer on the east side of that next to the multifamily.
On the east side, our current code exempts out single-family duplex and twin homes from providing a buffer.
Okay. Okay.
And then to the west, the daycare. John, would you like to answer on that one? As
They wouldn't
far as-
buffer there as well. The theory is if they're a single family and they're seeing what they're buying into. The buffer would be like if you're a multifamily and you're going up against a single family home, then
Okay.
you're then at that point creating that potential for the imposition, so hence the
Okay.
buffer, because you're
Okay.
imposing yourself onto them, but you know what you're getting into the other way.
Okay, I see what you're saying. That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay.
Any further questions?
I assume there's a fence or something around the playground area because the road would come out on Mullen.
Correct, yes, and the applicant has discussed in one of the comments that came up from this noticing period was from them as far as the playground area. And I can let the applicant discuss on it more, but in the top left you see this. Their concern was kids and the shared access here. And to my knowledge, they are getting that resolved, the applicant and the owner of that property, so.
Cool.
Okay. Anything else for staff?
Did you bring up the signage? Because that would need to be an additional condition?
Correct. That was not put in the staff
Yeah.
report. It was
Okay.
this erroneous thing that's kind of lying out there for special
Okay.
use permits in a commercial zone for residential, that the signage would be consistent with the underlying zone.
Okay, so basically, any
underlying ask,
signage
yeah,
would have
R2.
to be consistent with the current zone.
Well, underlying is R2. We'd want it to be
With-
consistent with R2, because that's what the ask is, develop as R2.
With R2 requirements. Okay. Got it.
Okay. Anything else? All right, Ethan, thank you. We'll bring up the applicant.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jeremy Terzulli, Project Coordinator with Olson Engineering, based out of Post Falls, Idaho. I reside in Hauser, Idaho. Ethan did a really good job of teeing this up, so some of this is gonna be repetitive. I apologize. I think a few of my snips and graphs are a little better than his, but we'll let you guys decide that. Okay. Again, Grace Delight West is the landowner. They want to do a series of twin homes on this site that they own directly across from Blue Dog RV. A couple of the questions I think I'll be able to answer as I move through my presentation. We did note that as of right now, those side street, those streets coming into that internal road, we're going to need to address those setbacks. It's one of those things that slipped through as we were designing this, but John brought it to my attention, and I think we can work through that if we get approval with the design process here. And as Ethan pointed out, we do have our standards of approval, which are up here, and I'm going to go through these kind of one at a time. The first two are kind of more yes or no questions. So the municipal code is, exists, and the different zonings exist basically to tell developers in the community what can be built or developed onto particular sites and particular zonings. And the area that I highlighted right here is right out of the code, basically confirming that residential uses will be allowed through the special use process. This is my snip that I thought was a little better than Ethan's because I had some vertical and horizontal lines in there, but like I said, you guys can decide. The proposed use is allowed in the CCS zoning through special use. Our request is for twin homes, and again, to clarify, I've brought a few of these types of products before this commission before. Just for clarification, from the street, it's the type of product that appears to be a duplex. The party wall is also the property line. It's platted that way. So from the street, it appears to be a duplex, but the intent is to be able to sell each unit individually so that people can own their particular unit. So that's the request, the twin home in the CCS zoning. With regard to complying with laws, ordinances, and regulations, this hearing is part of that process to make sure we're doing it legally, it's noticed legally, and we're involving the public in that process. And then as far as additional laws, ordinances, and regulations of the city and state, a lot of that gets fleshed out through the design process to conform with ADA approaches and crosswalks and those types of things. As you guys know, we'll have to, if we get approval, we'll have to come back here with a subdivision for you guys to look at as well. So a lot of the issues and those types of things will be addressed in the subdivision planning process. Whether or not the proposed use will be compatible with the general health, safety, and welfare of the public, and some of the bullet points that I have here is right now, and as Ethan pointed out, the neighborhood context is a sort of a mixed bag of residential, commercial uses. We're going to have good internal sidewalks, pedestrian connectivity up to Mullen, connectivity to the multi-use path to the south on Celtice Way and to points east and west downtown, sort of encouraging walking and biking to the downtown corridor. And another thing you'll note, and on the next slide I'll show this in a little bit more detail, there were currently approaches off of Celtice Way for potential commercial users. Those approaches will not be used as part of this plan. So those will go away, thus eliminating any traffic going out onto busy Celtice Way, which is a 4-lane thoroughfare. All connectivity with vehicles will be to the north to Mullen. Additionally, with regard to health and safety, water and sewers ready, available at the site. We believe we can do everything through gravity-fed sewer, no need for lift stations or force mains, no additional upgrades to the water system, no additional maintenance of that sort for the city. The easements on the sites have been identified, and those are going to be preserved. And again, I'm going to go on to that in the next slide. And then with regard to the property owner to the west, he did offer a comment, and it's a legitimate comment that he offered with regard to the safety of children in that playground. And I was able to reach out to Reverend Young, talk with him a little bit about this, and again, the next slide, I'll clarify a couple of these things, and I'll come back to that. Maybe a little hard to see, so I apologize. These are the approaches along Celtice Way that aren't going to be part of this product. So vehicles won't be able to come and go along Celtice along these approaches. Those won't be part of our plat. Here is that stormwater easement that the city has to address stormwater and get it moving down to the river. And as you can see on our proposed exhibit up here, we sort of design around that easement to maintain that. There's also a stormwater overflow easement right here. Our proposal is going to be to shift that slightly to the east on our plan in an area reserved for stormwater and open space right here. So we're aware of all those things. Now, here is that approach. Here is, and it's not a daycare. I think it's an accredited school. Maybe it's both. It's a school, right?
Yeah.
So in talking with the Reverend today, his concern, he's aware, see this easement right here. There's your shared access easement. And a lot of these commercial plats, that's the way they were done. You see them throughout the community. 2 commercial lots, same shared commercial access. It got recorded on the plat, and it got physically built. So he's aware that this playground equipment is right up next to that easement. And so in conversations with him, his concern is, you know, what happens if somebody comes in here hot on an icy day or something to that effect? And I think it's a legitimate concern. So the reason we positioned this here, it wasn't arbitrary. As part of this process, we have to do a pre-development meeting, a pre-application meeting with the city. And the city engineer offered comment at that time that any access to the site needs to happen at these currently built approaches. And so that directly drove this design right here. Our original design had it shifted slightly to the east. So to try to comply with that, that's why you see the approaches right here that align with the physically built approaches. So my conversation with the Reverend basically led to, let's keep the lines of communication open as we design. A couple of ideas that we work through would be a realignment of that approach if the city would be on board with that, understanding that concern. That would be one approach. Another approach to it would be perhaps the school could benefit from an additional access, so we would physically build that access, gate it off so that if they needed to get in here, maintain, replace playground equipment, they could access it from here. And we could put some bollards up there or something to that effect with a gate for that school. Another option that we did discuss, which would be my favorite of all of them, would be to sort of design within that easement and approach, create an elevated landscape bed there with perhaps some large oversized boulders, some trees for planting. It creates a visual barrier, creates a physical barrier, so if a car comes in there, it's only going to jack up the car and it's not going to wind up in the playground here. That would be my preference. But he and I talked at length today, and we agreed to keep him engaged throughout the design process, talk with the city, and try to work through a solution that works for everybody. So I think that's going to be something that we can certainly work through. And finally, whether the proposed use will or will not comply with the goals and policies found within the comprehensive plan. The staff report, which I went over, that Ethan put together, he cited a couple of dozen items in there that prove that it does comply with certain aspects of the comprehensive plan. I wanted to point out one critical thing with regard to the comprehensive plan, which is most comprehensive plans, I think all of them state that it is intended to be a living document and it is to sort of evolve as the community evolves. And I thought it was important to highlight that the comprehensive plan that was adopted in 2020 in the Chapter 3 regarding housing makes these two statements. Though the city's housing market remains relatively affordable, Post Falls homeowners are slightly more likely to be cost burdened compared to comparison jurisdictions, as well as Post Falls renters are less likely to be cost burdened compared to other jurisdictions. And I don't think there's anybody in this room right now that think that those two statements hold true today, and those were adopted by the city 2 years ago. I think, and I've stood before you guys several times over the last few years, and I've brought all the gaudy stats with regard to affordability of housing, the meager inventory, the escalating prices. I can't confidently say that this is the only solution to the housing problem, but I think we very, very strongly believe that additional products, smaller products, more apartments, affordable is not even the right word anymore, I don't think. Entry-level housing, something that can be within reach for service-based employees, working-class people, workforce housing, it's pivotal because we're at a tipping point right now, and if we don't come together despite our differences and try to come up with solutions, I do believe the youth of our community aren't going to be able to gain entry into the housing market. Those service-based industry employees, ultimately they're going to go elsewhere, not by choice, but because they can't find housing. I know many employers personally and peripherally in our community are just having a nightmare of an issue staffing their businesses. So more businesses to the community right now aren't really what's needed because we can't even staff the ones that we have. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for applicant?
No, you covered it.
None?
I don't have any, no.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. See you at rebuttal if needed.
Public comment, those in favor?
None.
Those neutral?
We do have one neutral and one opposition. You want both of them?
Let's have them both, yeah. All right. Neutral wishing to speak. Samantha, I know Mayor made the attempt last week.
Hi, Commissioners. Yes, Samantha Stigleader.
I will remember
Again, to say hi to all of you on another Tuesday night. So thank you for the wonderful presentations about this. When I read the agenda earlier today, I actually didn't have any opinions about this, but looking at the site plan and having driven down this stretch of Mullen multiple times, I'm sort of curious about the road. I'm sure that Mullen in its entirety has a classification of like minor collector or major collector or something like that. But this stretch of Mullen is not wide and not nice. And you actually have two schools, right? So you have that private Christian academy on the corner of Chase. And then if you go down by Spokane and Mullen, you have like what used to be the kindergarten and is like the special high school of some kind, right? And you have the library, and you have the Boys and Girls Club, and you have the high-density housing that's right there. And now we're gonna put, I tried to count really fast, I'm so sorry, is it like 30-ish units there? So I don't have anything to say about like the zoning that we're talking about necessarily and the special use permit and my constantly changing opinions on how we use special use permits around here. But I just don't know that this road is really up to handling this unless we have some sort of plan that I'm not privy to like making this road better. Also that turn onto Chase, you're kind of going up a hill, you're on Mullen. It's not great to like make left-hand turns or even right-hand turns really right there. So that's all that I wanted to bring up and if we wanted to consider that.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Do we want to address anything there? Or do we want to go through the rest of public comment?
If you wanted, Rob Paulus is here and probably could talk about the street stuff.
Rob, do you want to?
Commissioners, Robert Paulus, Assistant City Engineer. Mullen Avenue as well as Celtice Way are identified in our transportation master plan for long-term projects for improvements. We have a ways to go before we're going to build those. We're anticipating them probably 2030 before we see those improvements going in. Mullen Avenue is currently identified in our transportation master plan as a minor arterial roadway. Celtice Way is a principal arterial roadway, and we have a few different ideas that we've been working on over quite a few years as to how to proceed forward as to this is part of a part of a larger issue, which is looking at the entire transportation network between Idaho Street and where Mullen Avenue connects back into Celtice Way about a half mile west of this location. Right now, there's very low traffic volumes on this section of Mullen Avenue, except when you have the schools going in and out of session. It is marked at 25 miles per hour, and currently we do have a stop control at the railroad crossing at that location. And 2 years ago, we did do a study that showed that rail crossing could be changed to a yield control, but that's up to the railroad to come around and make that change. I think that generally hits most of Samantha's questions, and we are noting the issues with the intersection of Chase and Mullen, and we'll take a look at the site visibility, just make sure that things are good in that area. We do have a project that's scheduled for 2028, making some improvements on Chase between Mullen Avenue and the elementary school to the north of that location. Any questions for me further on that issue?
Are those just stop signs on Chase at Mullen?
What was that?
Is that is there just a stop sign on Mullen when it gets to Chase?
Mullen is stop controlled at Chase, yes.
I thought so.
Any other questions? None? Okay, thank you, sir. Continuing on with public hearing comment, wishing to speak in opposition, Mr. Bob Flowers. Mr. Flowers, come on up. You would need to fill out the paperwork and bring it forward, and then you would have to come up so that it can be read into record. If you want to do that real quick, you can. Go ahead, Mr. Flowers.
Okay, Bob Flowers. Well, this project reminds me of a comment that I heard in the paper from a lady earlier. At least one of you has heard this. Yuck. That's better than 12 units per acre on an unimproved road. There's no parking. It looks absolutely terrible. What happened to the comp plan as far as maintaining the small town feel? You know, there ain't nothing small town about it. This is cramming as 50 pounds of mud into a 10-pound sack. That is one of the most ugliest projects I have ever seen come across between the P&Z or the city council. That's cramming people on top of people. This is not what the people wanted in this town. As all you know, after this last election, they spoke very loudly and very clearly. They did not want this type of building. They wanted people to look at spreading folks out, not creating a mess like that. That's all I got.
I want to invite the applicant back up.
Wait. Sorry.
One more. Oh, yep, we're waiting. Okay. Ethan, do you want?
Can I ask staff a question? Is that okay right now?
Yeah.
So could you just remind me, I'm sorry, I should know this off the top of my head, but I don't. In the CCS zone, which is currently what that zoning is, correct? Would high-density housing be allowed, or just as a special use? Because obviously there's apartments right next door, so that's got to be high density.
Yeah, high density to the east. For high density to go in CCS, that does require a special use permit.
So more apartments could go there under a special use permit.
It would be a separate public hearing, it'd be another public notice.
Yes,
but
okay, all
It'd
right,
be the
but-
opportunity for the ask.
Okay,
Commercial development could go down there, and that would be permitted outright for a lot of
Okay.
commercial.
okay. And that's what I was asking, is that a special use? Would it be allowed as a special use to have higher density there? Okay, you
I have
answered
a
it.
question for John.
Okay, Mr. Megan, hang on just one second if you could, please. Go ahead.
So would the next step in the process then, after the special use permit, be for a subdivision?
They would have come back with a subdivision, which would be another public hearing, and that's where some of the stuff that you heard Ethan bring up regarding some of that access and stuff.
Right.
A lot of those are development type issues
Right.
that you'd see be mitigated at the time of subdivision.
Right.
This right here is really the use ask is
Type of use.
Yep, the type of use.
All right. Mr. Maggard, if you'd state your name and your address, you have 4 minutes, sir.
My name is Bill Maggard. I live at 618 West Mullen Avenue, and I've lived there since September of 1975. And what I wanted to bring out is that area across there used to have a very, very deep pit. And it was filled with all kinds of garbage, old refrigerators, car parts. In fact, at one time, maybe a lot of you don't remember, but I drove truck for a while for Hunt Brothers Construction. And we hauled crap from all over town and dumped it in that pit. And I guess one thing I have to say is I live next door to River City Mini Storage. And the original owner put in about 3.5 to 4 feet of fill there. And the current owner was telling me he wanted a permit to build more storage in there. He has to dig all that fill out and put new dirt in. And nobody has come there and tested that soil. And when they fill that pit, like I said, I worked for Hunt Brothers Construction driving a dump truck. We dumped everything under the sun in there, concrete. We cleaned up the veneer plants, log yard, all of their bark and stuff went in that pit. And if they had garbage from any place, they dumped it in there. And then the owner that filled the pit in, got in there with a dozer, he pushed the trees and everything else right into that pit. And has anybody done a soil sample on that? They turned my neighbor down to build more storage out there until he pulled all of that fill out and put new dirt in. And they didn't do a soil sample, they just told him he couldn't do it. So, and I know there's garbage down in that pit because I helped haul it in.
Well, Mr. Maggard, this is exactly about. It's facts and findings. So you bringing new information to the table is pertinent, and I appreciate it very much.
I'm really not against them building, but I wanted you to know, and the west entry of that is right across from the southwest corner of my property. The other entry is right at the co-op. There's a railroad track goes across there. Sometimes those long trains ties Mullen up for quite a while. Then all that traffic has to go out to the west side. And where Chase comes into, or Mullen goes into Chase, it is a very, very bad intersection because you cannot see the cars coming up the hill, and they come up fast. And if you're looking at 16 lots with twin homes on them, that's 32 homes. And if at full capacity, the normal is 2 cars per house. That's 64 cars a day coming out on that street. With a school to the west, the kindergarten and the alternative high school is on the east. The railroad track holds up traffic sometimes a long, long time. And all I'm saying is you should know that you're building on top of a dump.
Very, very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay, can we invite the applicant back up then?
Jeremy Terzulli, Olson Engineering again. I did bring Eric Olson's engineering training, who's been helping design this site. So if we have any technical questions with regard to how, if approved, a site development would work here, we can certainly bring him up and ask those questions. But With regard to any fill that's in that site, typically the way this would work, again, upon approval, is we'd scrape all the topsoil off, and if there was any issues with regard to settling that got noted at that point in time, we would address those. We would pothole in different areas looking for unsuitable soils, and we'd address it as needed. Again, we have no intention of building a house over degraded refrigerators and the like. So we can address that in the future.
Mr. Trezulli?
Yes.
Would you be opposed, with regard to that, would you be opposed to a condition of approval that requires a geotechnical evaluation of subsurface conditions?
I think if the commission thought that was prudent, I think that absolutely. We want to make sure that we do not, we don't want to build over an old dump.
And that condition wouldn't change, actually, but potentially could help the process at time of subdivision, because that's one of the requirements of subdivision approval.
Right.
We actually caught that on one of the subdivisions south of I-90, where someone came forward, same kind of a testimony. They did their environmental assessment, and they did find the dump, and so then that created another issue on the private side. But yeah, doing that as a condition of this wouldn't change and probably help facilitate the subdivision process.
Okay.
Makes sense.
With regard to other comments, I just kind of want to point out that and I know everybody understands this, but the language in the comprehensive plan, it kind of creates almost this dichotomy, right? We have what are community needs and what does small town feel mean? You know, we've got two sort of opposing objectives within the comprehensive plan that we're trying to thread this needle through. I understand and respect that. I understand that we're growing. I understand that the community is changing. We all get it. It's on a very personal level, I don't like it. I don't like the fact that I go up the North Fork of the Coeur d'Alene to take my family camping and fly fishing, and all the best camping spots are taken by out-of-state plates. Like, we're all experiencing the same thing. With regard to schools and those types of neighbors, it's we can't recruit more school teachers to our area because they can't afford housing. We're holding this paradox in our hands, and I don't know anybody knows how to solve it. If there were a blueprint, I think we could follow it. There's not. People are vacating liberal-run areas and liberal-run states in droves. And they're coming to places like Idaho, like Arizona, like Texas, like Florida. I follow these stories and have for years. I follow them ad nauseum, probably to my own, the detriment of my own mental health. It's a complete conundrum. Something has to be done. I fully respect Mr. Flowers' position, and in a lot of ways I agree with it. But what is the solution? To squash and to shut all this down, to call it ugly, to say the people trying to do this are horrible human beings and all they care about is the almighty dollar, I think that's short-sighted. I really, 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 truly do. And in reference to an article in the paper, there was a editorial that came out in the CDA Press a week or two ago. And to close, I just want to read the last few lines of it. And I'm quoting here. I don't know if the author was cited on the online version, so I can't give credit, but it was in the CDA Press, and the last few lines go like this. Change is only going to occur on an increasingly effective level if more people become involved, and that goes beyond brainstorming and perhaps even some personal sacrifice. A change in attitude among many who already live here is essential. Until we develop an understanding that hardworking people who reside in apartments or mobile homes are neither inferior nor unwanted, we'll have a housing problem exacerbated and perpetuated by moral corruption. If that sounds harsh, so be it. This outright discrimination against those who can't afford a $500,000 roof over their heads is abhorrent, and it flies in the face of Idaho values. In the weeks ahead, specific and practical workforce housing projects will be brought to the community's attention. We encourage citizens to scrutinize them rationally and with a little compassion. Thank you.
Any other questions for applicant while he's here? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Commissioners, anything else for staff? Anybody else until we close this out and discuss? Okay, then we'll go ahead and close it out. And we'll open it up with number one, whether the implementation of the special use would or would not conform with the purpose of the applicable zoning district. Describe what pertinent facts in the record relate to the purpose of the applicable zoning district. Anybody want to take a shot and discuss?
Well, it's allowed through this process, so I guess that means it's allowed. Okay?
Yeah, and with apartments next door to it, it seems like it would fit in.
Also talks about the street classifications in that area, so it fits there too.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, let's move to number two. Whether the proposed use constitutes an allowable special use as established by the chapter of the zoning district involved and complies with all other applicable laws, ordinances, and regulations of the city and the state.
I think that's pretty straightforward. It's part of the bulk and placement table and pretty well spelled out in the code. Staff report covers it really well.
Yes,
Nancy?
I agree. I agree. And it's
Kevin, anybody else? Other thoughts? Okay. Number three, whether the proposed use will or will not be compatible with the health, safety, welfare of the public and the land use in the vicinity of the proposed. Does the use have any deleterious characteristics that would impact health, safety, and welfare? I think we're going to need to address one of them.
Right. Well, yeah, first, I mean, they're definitely going to need to do a geotechnical report and exploration and very possibly some remediation on site to deal with that stuff, and the dump site. And to the gentleman who brought that up, thank you very much. That is, as he said, it's one of the primary purposes of these types of hearings is to get testimony from people who have knowledge like you do of the site and relay that knowledge, because I'm sure the person or the owner who purchased the property did not know that, and so that is incredibly valuable moving forward. With regards to transportation and the use in that location, I think of it from a standpoint of where is it in regards to schools. So it's what, less than probably a quarter mile from the Kinder Center, the alternative high school. It's less than a quarter mile from Celtice Elementary and Mullen Trail Elementary. I mean, that's easy walking distance, even for little kids or, moms and dads dragging their kids, by the hand to school, versus being in a, being in the pickup line in their cars. And as Mr. Paulus stated, the Mullen Avenue is well underutilized capacity-wise from its, it's well under its capacity. So I don't think there's any problems from transportation. And then there's, water reclamation as, sewer and water, they're there. And so I think that's fairly well covered.
Anything else to add? No?
I'll just add with the street, the interior street coming in with the playground there, I feel like the solution there should be fairly easy to come about. The lines of communication are already open, so some sort of natural barrier, rocks or something to mitigate that risk there.
Okay, then let's move on to the last one. Whether the proposed use will or will not comply with the goals and policies found within the comprehensive plan. What pertinent facts determine and relate this standard and determine if the proposal is consistent with the standard. Does it fall within the comprehensive plan?
I think it's pretty straightforward too, and it's covered.
I think this is kind of the area where we evaluate, you know, the bigger picture that most people are interested in, is that's the debate of whether or not we want single family only, or if we want a twin home product that you know, makes home ownership possible for those that it's not possible any other way. And you know, I've said many times in these meetings that I think it's something that we need, you know, to someone who has a very expensive home on a nice big piece of property, it probably is an ugly product. But to someone with living in a basement or living with 3 people in an apartment, it probably looks beautiful, you know. So
Perspective.
it's just perspective,
100%.
and we've got all shapes and sizes in our town, and I think it's something we clearly need.
Well said.
I talked to my bank lender today. Young people that are buying homes right now average $500,000 are paying $3,000 a month. That's out of control. I can't afford it. None of my workers can afford it. So we need affordable housing, but that's just a hard thing to come by, you know.
Well, I appreciate the applicant's comment that we can't even use the word affordable anymore, but entry level.
Yeah, that's where you're at.
You know, and again, to speak, and we're going to talk about this time and time again, and I know that we were just talking about the idea of the size of these houses, the location. For some people, they say great. Other people say no. I think the same thing applies to whether it's a small town feel. For one person, for you to say what a small town feel compared to myself, compared to anybody else is, I think you look at walkability. I think you talk about your neighbors. I think there's a lot of different factors that determine what a small town feel is. And just because there's townhomes, or just because there's apartments, or just because there's R2 or R3 doesn't make that different. But I think that sometimes we get lost in that shuffle a little bit. So any other questions or thoughts?
I mean, I think with regards to the comprehensive plan, I think the staff report, as well as the applicant's presentation, talks a lot about it, and it gives a lot of support for this. I mean, I agree with Ross, and I agree with you with regards to you know, entry-level housing, and I think that we as a community have a responsibility to the younger generations to provide them at least with a realistic opportunity, a route for home ownership. And, you know, this may not be something like this may not be a forever home for somebody, but it's a starting place to gain generational wealth that is probably otherwise unattainable. And, you know, I think back to 2001 when I purchased my house on my meager income at that point in time. But my house is quadrupled in value, and I don't think starting wages at that point in my career have quadrupled in value. And as a matter of fact, I know they haven't. So, you know, what are we doing if we're not looking at different options? And when it comes to small town values and small town feel, I honestly think that it has a lot more to do with the people who are here and how you treat your neighbor and how you feel about your community and how you get involved, and knowing your neighbor and being concerned about them. Not the fact that your neighbor lives in a twin home or a town home or on a lot in 1 acre with 1 acre. I think it's a matter of just, it's an attitude, not necessarily a type of housing.
Okay, anything else?
I do have a little concern over the road. I understand the classification of Mullen, but yeah, it's not in great shape in that area. But I think what I struggle with is there needs to be improvement to a lot of roads, and this is development that would be happening within the community, and they're not asking for sprawl. So with that, I have hopefully, we can improve the roads we have and not try and build roads outside of the community so that we can annex more property in. So hopefully that happens, and I guess at this point, we can't wait for all the roads to be fixed to put some houses in.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, I think we've covered everything, so at this point, I would entertain a motion.
Do it because you have the verbiage for the additional.
Don, was there a proposed signage condition?
Yes.
I didn't write that
That'd
down.
be consistent
And
with.
Phil and I talked about it further, and just pretty much needs to be consistent with residential signage.
With residential sign, okay. I would move to approve the Grace Delight special use permit, file number USE 0008-2021, finding that it meets the requirements for a special use permit, and adopting the, well, adopting our reasoning and approval criteria or stated in our discussion tonight, including conditions 1 through 4 as found in the staff report, adding condition 5 requiring that any signage be consistent with residential zoning code, and condition 6 states that prior to construction of any homes, a geotechnical evaluation shall be done and any remediation determined in that evaluation shall be completed.
I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Call for a vote.
Stephenson,
Yes.
Carey,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Kimball,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Schlauer,
Yes.
Hamby.
Yes.
All right. That brings us to the third public hearing of the evening. We will go ahead and open up the Hughes Annexation.
What's going on over there?
Good evening, Commissioners. John Manley, Planning Manager here, presenting the Hughes Annexation. Want to remind everybody that what we're looking at the Planning and Zoning Commission at this point is the zoning recommendation of this annexation request. You're not making a formal recommendation on the annexation itself. It's just looking at the zoning request as part of that annexation. The applicant is Ace Solutions, with the owner being Hughes Trust. And the applicant is looking forward you to recommend the RM, the Residential Mixed Zoning District, to support their 103-acre annexation. Mixed zones do require an annexation agreement. That's cited in Exhibit S4. Here's a location, as you see here, of the 103 acres. It's approximately the southwest of the intersection of Prairie and Meyer Road, about half mile east of Highway 41 in Prairie. So I intend to go over some of the elements of the development agreement first before I go into the zoning review criteria, just to kind of give an idea of what is in this development agreement, and then, like I said, then go into the review criteria. So here's the proposed conceptual plan. I did color code it, as the font on this is a little bit hard to read. So I attempted here where you see the standalone yellow, that is where they're proposing single-family homes only at that location. Where you see the yellow and the diagonally hatched areas, that is where they're looking at potentially doing single-family and twin homes in those locations. The green hatched with yellow, they are looking at either doing a single-family or a private school. And where you see the red checkerboard, that's where they're looking at the either commercial or multifamily. I used a tool in Bluebeam to kind of quantify what those areas were because they wasn't cited in the applicant submittal package. But looking at the approximate acres, these aren't exact, but you're looking at about 15 acres for that commercial multifamily area, at about 14.6% of the land approximately. And then the single-family twin home being about 10, with the site that could do the school or the single-family at about 12%. The code, if you look at the residential mixed, allows a ask of up to 20% of an RM area to be multifamily and commercial to be about 10%. So you can see here that potentially, if approved with the blanket allowances with RM, you could get 15 acres of all multifamily, or you could get up to about 10 acres commercial with about 5 acres multifamily, kind of flexing in that manner. In the green there, you see the proposed open space. The residential mixed district requires 7% of the site to be open space, and there's a condition that I'll speak to later that kind of looks at the timing of some of that open space and its delivery. We'll state that what the development agreement does do, it allows design criteria and conditions to go above and beyond what our zoning code typically would require, or through the permitting process. So looking at the commercial uses in the residential mixed, it's more limited than your typical commercial zone, but you see them as being more neighborhood centric or complementary to neighborhood development, something that someone may go to through their daily activities as they live near there. And this here is kind of a list of those commercial type uses. You see here that like convenience store, no gas, a grocery store less than 17,500. So it kind of has some sizing and limitations of some of that as well. Here you see the some of the conditions of the cited in the staff report. Once again, these aren't in zoning code. So these, we're addressing a duplex design standards here, addressing a rear-loaded duplex lot, setting some minimum widths, front-loaded, like delineating front-loaded lots must be a minimum of 50 feet, so they don't propose smaller lots than that. It has other issues. We deal with front-loaded duplex lots on cul-de-sacs. This condition, 5.24, dealt with, at the time we didn't have a section in our code, so staff's proposing of removing this out of the development agreement. It dealt with maximum driveway widths and percentage of lot frontage, and we're looking at here, we now have it in Title 12, 1260 approach width. So because that's now in our zoning code, staff sees it as not being needed in a development agreement. So we also look at having other conditions attached to twin homes, looking at accessory structures where they could be located. Here where you have twin homes, the 2-foot separation between driveways. This condition here regulates the percentage of the massing of the front of being a garage. So this condition kind of eliminates the potential for some of that you see on the left there, where you have predominantly a garage at, about 50% of that front facade or greater as being a garage. So on the right side are typical homes you see in Post Falls. So for the single family homes, they wouldn't be very garagey. They'd be a mix of some residential element with that garage face. And also gives some parameters of how that's measured. Now to the open space that I was referencing in this development agreement, more or less, The meat of it says, owner agrees that no more than 50% of the property or gross area may be platted or otherwise developed until 50% of the required open space has been completed. Additionally, no more than 85% of the property gross area may be platted or otherwise developed until all of the required open space has been completed. So the intent here is if it was, if the RM went forward and if it was developed, that they wouldn't back end the open space to the end to where it would financially not make sense to get the open space. Also would guarantee the residents that moved there earlier in the process would know about when they could expect parkland to potentially be dedicated to the city or be developed on the, as a privately owned park also. They would have either one of those options. Current land use, ag in the county at this point in time. Staff does not or are aware of any significant topology or vegetation matters to impede development of this. Water provider would be Ross Point Water District, and there's a will serve letter, Exhibit A9 in the staff report. Sewer being provided by the city of Post Falls. Not mentioned a whole lot in tonight's presentation, but in the development agreement, there was extensive language about the timing of surcharges and making it clear of how that surcharge and when the infrastructure would be implemented potentially with the project. So before I go into criteria, any questions I have on the development agreement before that zone change review criteria has gone over?
Any questions?
No.
Okay.
So looking at the review criteria for this request, we're looking at amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the comprehensive future plan, the comprehensive plan's future land use map. Also consistent with the goals and policies in the comp plan. We're also looking at the zoning and how it's consistent with the street classifications, traffic patterns, existing development, future land uses, community plans, or other geographic or natural features. So the bulk of my next slides are really going to go into the future land use map and the comp plan policies, goals. Once again, there's the subject site with the black diagonal hatch. To the west, you see the Foxtail PUD, a planned unit development, and that's all highlighted in yellow, which is the single family R1 zoning district. And along Highway 41, you see the CCS, Community Commercial Service Zones. Right here at that location, there is a school, elementary school, that's constructed adjacent to the proposed annexation. Here is the future land use map. So you see here this is Foxtail and the PUD, and you see the pinks, the business commercial, reds, community commercial services. Where blue this site is, it's transitional. So it's transitional because, well, we had no idea when this would potentially be requested to be annexed. And if, no matter how you colored it, more than likely it would be incorrect. And so transitional is used as a way to, for the areas of unknown, to provide maybe some guidance in the comp plan. And that guidance for the transitional area is looking at focus areas. And so you can see this being broached in the, as part of the transitional designation to review the proposals at this focus area and where is it at. So it's in the 41 North focus area. So it's looking at focus provisions for multifamily, commercial, tech uses near higher classified roadways. So Prairie Avenue is a principal arterial, so you would look at those provisions and proposals looking at 41 North, and odds are you'd see applications going in that direction. Development should provide pedestrian connectivity to all multi-use paths and trails, including the Prairie Trail. So I looked at and kind of overlaid what their proposal was, and here's the principal arterial. This is where their commercial and multifamily ask is. And in green, that is their proposed open spaces. It may or may not be exact in those locations, but we would look at, through the development, this latter state, development should provide pedestrian connectivity to all multi-use paths, trails, including the Prairie Trail. The Prairie Trail is, as you see here in that dashed line. So through development of this, we'll be looking at getting that connectivity to meet that focus area element. So some of the goals of the comp plan: grow and sustain a balanced, resilient economy for Post Falls, providing community prosperity and fiscal health. Maintain, improve Post Falls small town scale, charm, aesthetic beauty. And keep Post Falls neighborhoods safe, vital, and attractive. Looking for all types of quantities of land and uses, supporting the community's needs for the city's long-term sustainability. Protect and maintain Post Falls natural resources, including clean air, soils, river, and aquifer, minimizing light and noise pollution citywide. And maintain the city of Post Falls' long-term fiscal health. So there's kind of an overview of the goals that you may seem applicable to this request, some of the policies that you may seem appropriate. It says here, I'm not going to read all these off, but I kind of will pause here though. But policy 1, support land use patterns that do the following. Second policy is apply and revise zoning designations with careful consideration factors, including the following here. Staff report kind of goes into some more of analysis on each one of these elements. Policy 3, encourage development patterns that provide suitably scaled daily needs, services within walking distance of residential areas, allowing a measure of independence for those who cannot or choose not to drive. And there's policy 7, encourage the development of off-corridor access and circulation for the commercial and mixed-use areas abutting limited access arterials. So that kind of summed up that first 3 review criteria, and in kind of a nutshell, kind of went over that. Now I'll go over the next ones, 4 through 6. Commercial and high-density residential zoning is typically signed along streets with higher road classifications. I've already addressed the commercial and multifamily is being proposed next to the principal arterial of Prairie Avenue. Also to note that Fennicus Road and My Road are major collectors. Limited or neighborhood commercial and lower density residential zoning is typically assigned for properties as they proceed farther away from higher intense urban activity. Do want to note here that, as you go from Prairie Avenue south, or you go from 41 east, you are transitioning away from some of those urban corridors of the urban activity. Hence, you do see the single family being provided in their request. The last criteria deals with industrial zoning. They're not asking for that, so that's really not germane to this, to the ask. Here are the agencies that were notified. Kootenai County and Rescue, they more or less state that they're in partnership with the city throughout the review and permitting process. Post Falls Police Department, they remain neutral. Post Falls Highway District, they did have a comment, said that they'd request right-of-way dedications of 50-foot minimum from Centerline on Prairie Avenue as part of their comment. In the development agreement, it did state that from the section line that we would be requesting 55 feet from section line, which would more than meet what the desires are from Post Falls Highway District. Any questions for me at this point in time?
Is Myra and Prairie, John, not considered a commercial node? A potential
Myra and
commercial?
Prairie?
It would be right in front of that gym there, right?
Meyer is right at that
right there.
location. I can't recall 100% off the future land use map if that is or isn't. I apologize. I know that 41 and Prairie is, but
Can you go back a couple slides? I think maybe it'll tell us.
this would be an awkward one for it though, because you have that rail there at that location.
Right there,
Thanks.
right there. So what's the next one, Huter?
Yeah, the next one would be where the Hutter interchange would intersect with Prairie Avenue is the next identified potential commercial node.
Right, okay. Is there a reason why that wouldn't be considered a node?
More than likely, like I said, looking at that area and the proximity to that rail corridor, that probably was why it wasn't. Plus the spacing. If you have a pretty intense commercial area on 41 and Prairie, you may get a linear corridor stretching down Prairie with the mixing of uses, and then you would end up usually having another node further away, like on Prairie and Hutter.
Right, okay, thank you.
Other questions? No?
No,
None
that's
at
the only
this
one I
time?
had.
All right. Thank you, sir. We will bring up the applicant.
Commissioners, thank you. Appreciate this opportunity to, for you to hear our proposal. And I want to also thank you, John and Rob, and all of the city staff who I know have done a lot of work on this. I really appreciate it. I want to also acknowledge all of our neighbors who are here, who have given up their evening. Thank you for your civic interest. My name's Mark Hughes, as in the Hughes family, as in the Hughes farm. We came here initially, we're not from here, like most of the people that live here, we're not from here, just be upfront with that. We originally came here from the Midwest in 1970, and I can already tell most people in the room weren't alive at that time, so I'll tell you what Post Falls was like back then. It was a bump in the road. If my memory serves, fact check me if you will, the sign on the outskirts of town said population 1,200. There were no traffic lights in Post Falls. There wasn't any traffic. We bought this farm in 1970 because our brother, Fran, refused to do anything with his life but farm. And our dog, Higgins, would walk out, lay down on the road, Prairie Avenue, because it was nice and warm. That asphalt was nice and warm. And there was no traffic. If there was, you knew who it was. You know, hey, there goes Lyle. Oh, there goes Pat. Hey, there goes Donnie Beck. And as my brother reminds me, when somebody did drive by, they were usually driving a tractor. Boy, how times have changed. We've grown a little bit. Boy, have we grown. A college professor of mine made an interesting comment that really hit me at the time. He said, "You're growing or you're dying." He, of course, was talking about living organisms, but if anybody owns a business, they know you're growing or you're dying. If you're a town, you're growing or you're dying. If you want to travel anywhere around here, off the beaten path, you're going to see little towns that are languishing. Many of them are dying. The mine closed, the mill closed, the plant closed, the factory closed. The kids can't wait to graduate from high school because they are gone and they ain't coming back. Those little towns are sort of dying, but boy, that sure isn't our problem. Our challenge is growth. How do we plan for it? How do we manage it? Well, we've been here for about a half a century, and boy, have we seen growth. But we've also seen something dying. Agriculture. Anybody know what we used to raise on the farm back when we moved here? Anybody ever heard of Jacqueline seed? Yeah. We raised grass seed. Very profitable crop. I was told that 70% of the seed that was sold in the United States came from right here, Rathdrum Prairie. 70%. And if you know if anybody was here at the time or not, I will just tell you how you raise grass seed. After you harvest the seed, you burn the fields. Common farming practice, it's used in sugarcane fields all around the world, lots of different crops, you burn the fields. This place looked like Hiroshima. Smoke going up miles into the air, visible for 100 miles away. Well, the newcomers didn't care that we had been raising grass seed for decades. They didn't like the smoke, and they sued us. So what did we do? We said, okay, you're right, you win. We'll give up the profitable crop that made farming profitable for us. First nail in the coffin. Not long after, the irrigation district closed. Shortly after World War II, BPA had a lot of excess electricity. Well, we created a irrigation district and got a 50-year contract with BPA for electricity for pennies that powered 2 Rolls-Royce engines that pulled water out of the river down here and irrigated this whole prairie. Of course, after 50 years, BPA wanted market rates for their electricity. There went the irrigation district. Second nail in the coffin for agriculture. Now, all of these things that were making agriculture more difficult here on the prairie were happening at the time that the growth was happening that we all know about. I don't have to cover that. And needless to say, a lot of the smaller farms that couldn't raise grass seed anymore and couldn't afford to irrigate said, well, let's sell out. So we had growth going this way, agriculture going this way. What happens when agriculture or any industry is going in that direction? The support services aren't around anymore. The tractor dealerships, all of the people that helped the farmers with all of their needs said, we're closing our place here, we're going to keep our place in Spokane open. Third nail in the coffin. So that's what's been happening to agriculture on the prairie, okay? We, the Hughes family, have reached the end of the road because our brother Fran, who farmed the land, passed away September 29, 2017. We're done farming. We've reached the end of the road. We've had farming in our family forever, ever since our ancestors landed on these shores. And we can trace it all the way back to the old countries. But we're done. Farming's done. So what do we do now? It probably wouldn't surprise you if I were to tell you all of the interest we've been getting from people interested in the property. Phone calls, emails, people driving up to the house, letters in the mail. Oh my gosh, you have no idea. Well, yes, you probably do. So they've thrown some big numbers around. Big numbers. Of course, we're a big family, so it'd be spread around a lot of us, but it would still be a nice payday, right? You could probably buy a new car, get rid of the junker, pay off a mortgage, buy some groceries. You know, a lot of them have had an interesting comment. Now, Mark, don't get emotionally attached. You're making a business decision here. You got a good asset. You want to maximize your profit. You don't want to be emotional about this. Well, excuse me. We are emotionally invested in this land. It's been our home. We all worked on the farm, jugging milk, milking cows, changing pipes, harvesting, working the fruit stand. When we'd sit around the dinner table, most nights, everything on the table came from the farm. The meat, the vegetables, the bread, the butter, the cheese, the ice cream. We raised ourselves. Even as we grew up and everybody moved on, this is where we came to celebrate holidays, birthdays, anniversaries. This was our home. It was the center for our family. And the grandkids all have worked on the farm. So we are emotionally invested in this farm. Do you think we're selling out? Not a chance. Not a chance. You think we could live driving by that farm and seeing it packed full of vinyl-covered boxes, human warehousing? Not a chance. Not a chance. So if that was an option, let's just all agree that that's not going to be considered. But we're done farming, so what do we do? Well, we're in the county. And just to the east of us is blue sky. We could do that. Carve the land up into 5-acre parcels and sell it to the millionaires who would love to have a piece of North Idaho. Put their McMansion on there, drop a well, septic system, put the shop and the barn up, fence it off, put their horses in. Be pretty. As you drive by, you could look at nice, pretty McMansions there with their horses out there. It'd be beautiful, wouldn't it? So that's an option, because we're in the county. The third option, and the reason we're here, is because we have a vision for this property, this land. And if I were to take that vision and to distill it into one word, that word would be community. A village, a livable, vibrant community for families, kids, retired couples, and yes, people starting out, we want to have options. I guess I shouldn't use the word affordable, right? Starter homes. I'm learning. So we want to have a mix of housing to be able to have that kind of mix that you would have in a village, a little town. There's going to be a park, you saw it on the slide, abutting the trail there. It's going to be dedicated to our brother, Fran, who farmed that his entire adult life. There's going to be several other open spaces. You didn't see them on the plan. I could show them if you wanted. And these open spaces, by the way, aren't pretty little pieces of green that as you're driving by, you go, oh, that looks nice. No, no. We're talking about usable open spaces like, how would you like having your house backing up to a nice big green? I'm talking about the kind of spaces that are usable, where kids can go out and throw balls around, have a game of soccer, a game of football. Usable spaces. You know, I can imagine somebody going, Kathy, what are the Millers doing across the green there? They're dragging chairs and tables out onto the green. Well, honey, didn't I tell you Susie's getting married tomorrow? They're having the wedding reception out there. Oh, you know, Jimmy's graduated from high school. They're having the graduation party out there. I'm talking about spaces that are usable for the community members there. The premier space was visible on the slide you saw. It's oriented north and south. At the north end is a fountain, a big fountain, the kind that shoots up 20, 25 feet in the air. At the south end is a piece of sculpture. I have some ideas about that. We haven't really settled on what it would be. But it's a nice big green, again, where the annual harvest festivals, the neighborhood festivals, the potlucks would be held. And in addition to all of these open spaces, of which there's 6 or 7, depending on whether the schools come in, I think you know that we're in communication with some schools, there's community gardens. So the community pathways open up and there's community gardens, again, available to residents. And these are little oases that have picnic tables and benches, places where people congregate. If you've traveled around at all, oh, and by the way, I mentioned the fountain. If you've traveled around at all and seen vibrant communities, places that are like, hey, this is really cool, this place is really cool. Have you ever seen a fountain? Are there not 1 million people hanging out there? The whole point of what we're trying to create is the kind of space that draws people out of their homes, that makes people want to get out and feel like they're part of a community. So I mentioned green spaces, I mentioned community gardens. Ray, you know, you mentioned something about the Baptist church. Wouldn't it be nice people can walk there not having traffic? Well, how about people living in this community and you don't have to get in your car to drive into town to go to a gym, a coffee shop, drop the kids off at a daycare, go to a restaurant, go to the brew pub. What's a neighborhood without a neighborhood brew pub?
Mr. Hughes, you have 2 minutes, just so
2
you're aware.
minutes. Thank you. I'm almost done.
Nope, you're good. I just want to let you know.
I could talk all night. I'm excited about this project. There's also going to be some commercial space because we'd like for there to be the ability of having the chiropractor, the dentist, the local finance guy, whatever, you know, those kinds of professional services available to residents in the community. So that's the plan. And everybody that I have showed this to, when I've rolled it out and said, here's where everything's going, here's this, here's that, here's this, everybody stands there and looks at it and goes, same reaction. Wow, nobody's doing anything like this. This is going to be great. I go, yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's going to be great. This land has been, for us, very good to us. The farm has been very good to us. Post Falls has been very good to us. North Idaho has been very good to us. We've been here for what, going on half a century. We ain't leaving. And our intention for this property is it represents our future. We all want to live there. It's going to be a gem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything to cover in the last?
Just real quick, Roger Glessner with Ace Solutions, we represent the owners on this project. I think you could feel the passion. You could certainly hear it. We think that the mixed, or the residential mixed zoning is going to be perfect for the vision that they have. It will provide lots of different buildings and different structures and different type of housing that is more affordable and more obtainable. It will have all of the other attributes that go with it, the trails, the paths, the open spaces. They're actually probably going to build more open space than is actually required in this zone. And we think that this zone is perfect for this application.
Excellent, thank you.
I think my time's up.
Any questions for the applicant? Any questions? Okay. All right, thank you very much. Again, Commissioners, a reminder, our job here tonight with the Hughes Annexation is we are simply recommending a zoning forward to council. That being said, individuals wishing to speak in favor,
We have a couple in favor, some neutral, some in opposition.
why don't we bring them all up? All right, in favor, not wishing to speak, Sheila, is it Strain? I'm in favor of the annexation of the Hughes property to move forward with the proposed development of a family-friendly neighborhood. Also in favor, not wishing to speak, Teresa Drummond. I'm in favor of moving forward with the annexation and development of the Hughes property. In favor, again, not wishing to speak, Marty Hughes. This is a well-planned development project led by a longtime resident family who lives here and are concerned in retaining the quality of life. I would rather have this type of local development than seeing by an out-of-town corporation with no sense or concern for the local culture and sentiment. Neutral, wishing to speak, Samantha. There, I gotta take my readers off so I can see. Come on up.
Samantha Stigleader. I know you'll get it. It'll be really easy one day.
I'm trying to phonetically
Yeah.
remember it.
So I want to apologize, first of all, because I read through the staff report earlier this evening and I guess I didn't understand that we're only talking about recommending for the zoning and not like the actual annexation itself. Maybe that's not super clear when you read it yourself. And I'm also curious if we can get the slideshow in that for other people to see so that we can make sure like that I can look at the points that the staff is presenting to have like more concise and appropriate things to say to what staff presents instead of just looking through everything, right? So like some of those conceptual drawings with like the really nice colors weren't in the report that I looked at online, and it's hard to pull up. So anyway, there's that. Zone change criteria B, the goal of a small town charm, I would just say that like probably not 103 acres annexed into the city is not small town charm. And then policy 2, compatibility with surrounding uses. So because on the other thing, I couldn't really see where all of the specific low density, high density and things were, I said that perhaps it didn't because we were asking for mixed zoning, right? And that could sort of be anything essentially, but it was right up next to R1 and then the mixed housing on the other side. So I thought maybe that would be a consideration for policy 2, that it perhaps doesn't meet that. And then my other consideration was maybe we could annex in less than 103 acres at a time, especially if we're just going to give it all one zoning. That kind of was my other question to staff. We're picking one zone for 103 acres, but are we committing at this time as a city to what is being proposed in this development agreement? Do those go hand in hand, or are we just saying, you can have mixed zoning, and then eventually you can come back and ask us what you're gonna do, and at that time it could really be anything, but you asked for 103 acres of mixed zoning, and we already told you yes, so that could like be lots and lots of things, right? I think that was most of it, other than my comments about proposing a utopia and asking Post Falls to sort of like bless that, but that doesn't have to do, I guess, with zoning, so I won't bring it up. Slideshow, and I just wanted to bring up the idea of putting starter homes and like more affordable homes in a community with a private school that these people are going to walk to. I've been blessed with a decent living, and I live in a decent house, and I have 3 children, and I can't afford private school. So I just thought that I'd just like to bring up that kind of dichotomy in dreams that we're having here. So I think that's all that I have, and there's time back. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much.
I can clarify a couple things. The development agreement gets recorded against title, so that becomes a governing document with it. So it's not a carte blanche, everything in the RM. They have that conceptual plan, and they've gone in and they said they're going to do twin homes and single family in that area. So that's what the agreement has, and that's what they're going to put in that general area.
Right.
Same with the commercial mixed multifamily, where that's denoted on that will be recorded against title, and each time we would have a phase, we refer to that. So that does become kind of the control document, the development agreement.
Excellent. Thank you. In opposition, wishing to speak, Mr. Bob Flowers. Mr. Flowers, as you come up, 2 things. One, I appreciate your passion. I appreciate the fact that you, rather than anybody else, continually show up and are here speaking, and I appreciate that. The one thing I don't appreciate is bringing up and frankly playing on a comment at another city council meeting. I know what you're doing. And let's stick to the facts. We've got the Hughes annexation. We're looking at a recommended zoning. Let's just talk about that.
Okay. Bob Flowers. I will do this, Mr. Dave. One, Mr. Hughes, I was here in 1970, back in those days too. And in fact, we were over on Corbin Park Road back in those days. But I thought that I was also under a misunderstanding. This was going to be a recommendation for both the annexation and the zoning. And now I see that it's not. I don't believe we should be annexing any more land in right now to begin with. We can't even afford to take care of what we have. I mean, like Mullen Avenue that's somewhere down the road with this last project that was just approved. You know, we could spend the money other places. I love Mr. Hughes's idea. I'd like to see those plans, because if a community like that can actually be built without it being crammed, packed together, I'd love to see it here in Post Falls. But right now, we got other problems in the city, and I just don't believe it's time to take on more roads, more city, more land. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comment? Okay. Does the applicant want to come up and address anything?
Well, I think John kind of covered the agreement that goes along with this zoning application and annexation, where this isn't just, we can't just go in there and do anything we want if we annex this in at the full 103 acres. We're set at a certain set of rules that are already agreed upon and already signed and already in place. And so if we, if we broke it down and looked at the different zones within this zone, the commercial, the high density residential, the medium density, the low density single family, all that, we could break it down, we could annex in those pieces and say, okay, this is the zone we want for this piece. And then we could move on to the next, and we could move on to the next, and we could move on to the next, end up with the same thing. I don't think that would be a well-planned plan. I think that would be a jumble, a mess, by doing it all at the same time and utilizing what the city has for a zoning policy for the RM zoning, that gives us the ability to actually plan this development and actually make it flow, make it work, make sure the paths connect and travel through, make sure that the open spaces are built as the development moves on, make sure all of those things happen. And so I think, bringing this in at 103 acres, agreeing to the RM zoning and developing it under their passion and what they want to do to this property, I think is a perfect solution for the city. And I applaud the city for having this zone and working, to create this kind of a zone and this type of planning, rather than just little scattered pieces all over the place. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
I'm going to add, if I may, comment about traffic. As I mentioned, our brother passed away September 20, 2017, and at that time we said, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We're not going to farm it anymore. And the decision was made, let's not rush. Let's think about this. Let's let them get what they're going to do with 41. Prairie Avenue, what, Rob, 20, across our farm is
28.
Yeah, but when is that scheduled?
2028.
Okay. The fact is that the traffic is something that we took into account, and so, we looked at Fennicus, we looked at Prairie, we looked at what was happening on 41 Meyer. So we wait, knowing traffic was a concern, we waited until this day to move forward.
Okay. Any questions for applicants? No? None? All right, thank you again, appreciate it. Question for staff, specifics, details, any additional information that we need? Nothing, okay. Then we'll go ahead, close that out. And we'll go through our list.
John, did you have this one up here in here?
Yeah, it's in the.
Right here?
Well, as you're pulling it up, I'll start.
This is the zoning one.
Consistent with the future land use map. Pertinent facts, records that relate to standard determine if it's a fit. Anyone?
I think the land use map has it as transitional and as an implementing zone. That would be one of those implementing zones in that transitional area. And I think the way they have it laid out is exactly that. I mean, it's almost the definition of transitional, where it's transitioning from single family to kind of a mixture of some a little bit more dense things, and then up on, to the south. And then when you get up north to Prairie Avenue, they have it where there's commercial and multifamily, which is the higher end of the use, which is completely appropriate on that arterial corridor.
Other comments?
I was just gonna add, if you look at the zoning map in other areas, like Ray just said, even though it says transitional and it's that blue and it's not necessarily red or yellow, where they're gonna build makes sense for that area based on other areas in the zoning. So you got your commercial up by Prairie, and then your twin homes in R1 closer to that Foxtail neighborhood, which has R1 in it. So it makes sense.
Other side? Nancy, Ross, Kevin, anything else to add there? No. Okay. Vicky? Yeah.
No, I like that their design for it, or their thoughts for it, is a mixed use there, and putting in some twin homes. Hopefully they will do that, because I think we need some of the a way for other people, young people, to be able to afford housing. So I'm hoping there'll be some twin homes and other stuff besides single family. I like that they have a lot of open area thoughts, and hopefully it'll all flow the way they've thought it out.
Okay, number 2. Amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the goals and the policy found in the comprehensive plan. So we talked about future land use map, comprehensive plan. Which goals and policies do you believe are relevant to the proposal? Anyone's thoughts? Anyone want to take a stab at this?
Well, in the staff report, it talks about goal 1 here, growth and sustainable balance, and economy for Post Falls, and providing a community to prosper and physical health. I think if this vision comes to fruition like they've designed it, I think it definitely accomplishes that goal. Time will tell, but I think that is the actual vision, and it ties in right directly to that goal.
Any other thoughts?
I feel like that under the goal 1, is it appropriate? And it's one of the requirements is that it's the areas where other public services and are sufficiently available for the intensity of use. So I don't know what other public services are available right there at this time. Besides a highway,
There's a fueling depot
Water
right
and
there.
sewer.
there is no water and sewer right there, right now, right? It would have to be brought in. It's not annexed into the city. It's in the,
Said
I think
Foxtail.
It's
the
in the
development
county.
agreement says it's adjacent, I believe, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's water and sewer right at the south boundary.
Yeah, right here.
but not on the property. It's
No, no,
not
no.
in the city
No.
of Post
Right,
Falls
right,
right
yeah.
now.
Adjacent to it.
It's adjacent but not on property.
That's consistent with every,
So those are public services. We're not talking about transportation and bike paths and walking paths, and we're talking about water and sewer in that section. Is that what you're saying?
I would think so. That's what they mean by services, probably.
Public services?
Other thoughts?
you know, when looking at goal 5, it says to keep Post Falls' neighborhood safe, vital, and attractive. And I think that the vision that they have for this, and with the way the development agreement is constructed with their development plan, I think it does exactly that. It creates a safe and a safe neighborhood with that's attractive and has some vitality that will hopefully stay for years to come.
Kevin, you were starting to say something.
Nope.
Oh, you weren't?
That was
Okay.
Ross.
Oh, was it Ross? Please, sir.
Interrupted Ross.
That's all right. Yeah, as far as allowing our community to grow and prosper, I wasn't here in 1970, but 2 generations of my family before me were. And our family farm was not in the city, but it's now the center of Post Falls. And that's the way a city grows, is it grows out. And, you know, a lot of the fine residents in Post Falls now live on that farm. And so I think that this is the way we have to allow the city to grow. And as far as the zoning recommendation, I really like the commercial node aspect, the community aspect of these. It isn't specifically listed as a commercial node, but that's the vision of the Hughes family, it sounds like. And I think that you know, relieves strain on the rest of the city and gives people a nice area to be in. And so I think it's pretty vital to the future of the town to be able to grow.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Well, I do think that we also have to keep in mind the growth and development pattern that's in the area, right? So just northwest of there, we've just approved a large commercial subdivision where there's, you know, that's being kicked off. So, you know, And commercial development doesn't typically happen unless they've got an anchor tenant. So, you know, that Highway 41 on Prairie is quickly going to become a large commercial node. And so having residential in this close proximity, like what Ross, to dovetail on what Ross said, is that, you know, when there's commercial presence there on that, in that node, the residential development next to it has to travel less far to get those commercial services. And that takes the stress off of the transportation system in the vicinity and the rest of town.
Anything else? All right, let's move on to number 3. Zoning and assign and follow consideration such items as street classifications, traffic patterns, existing development, future land use, community plans, geographic and natural features, encouraging a balanced land use to help Post Falls remain desirable, stable, and a sustainable community. Is the proposed zoning compatible with those listed items? I would have to say that the applicant's presentation hit a lot of those. Obviously, there's a lot of the detail that we're going to have to continue to develop on, but what's our thoughts?
I was going to say the same exact thing. If everything he outlined in his presentation and what'll ultimately end up in the development agreement comes there, it hits every one of those. Balance of land use, and talks about traffic patterns, and you know, you talk about Prairie, and it's going to be busier, but that there's a plan there, and you're waiting for 41 to get done. So, I think it hits all that.
Residential mixed hits those items better than any other use other zoning we could apply, I believe.
I like residential mix. I really do. I do think it done right can create community, and I really believe that's good. That's a great thing to have. So I think it meets that. I think that my my resistance is a little that we used to, when they used to come in front of us, we used to have the annexation with the proposed use. That would zoning, that would come together. And they changed that, which is just something that they did, that the city had every right to do, and now that the city council takes care of annexations, and that's good. It just feels awkward because we did it differently for a long time, and so when we started doing it this way, I think it still feels a little awkward to me to do it this way, but that's our job. So my resistance a little bit is it just feels like I'm 7 and my mom wants me to pick a dress, but I want to wear a pair of pants. So my mom's going to win, right? I'm going to wear a dress. So it's just a little awkward still.
I think that is a struggle in the sense of where we're at now, just the idea of a recommended zoning, and I think it's hard for the public as well because, you know, I think with RM, we have a little more control because of those development agreements, but initially, it doesn't necessarily feel like that.
Right,
So,
right,
yeah,
correct.
makes sense.
I agree.
Anything else to add on number 3? No? Okay, we'll move on to number 4. Commercial and high-density residential zoning is typically assigned along streets with higher road classification. Is the request for commercial and high-density residential, is that the right fit? How does everyone feel there?
Well, I mean, Prairie Avenue is principal arterial. That's the highest classification the city of Post Falls has aside from the interstate. So that's met pretty much by definition.
Yeah.
I believe you. I'm just creating some dialogue. Anything else?
And then the development agreement will outline exactly what percentage of both commercial and high-density residential is in there based on the RM zoning. And then it's, you know, like Ray said, Prairie is the right place to put it.
Anything else? Road classification? Let's move on to number 5. Limited or neighborhood commercial and low-density residential zoning is typically assigned to property as they proceed further away from higher intensity urban activity. Is this the properly near high, is this the property near higher intense urban activity? Obviously, we realize that that's not the case. So everyone's thoughts on it.
I think the way they have it set up with their lower density towards the south, which is where that's the adjacent to the lower density, lower intensity area. So, I mean, I think they've transitioned it nicely. And also, it's probably also important to point out that that lower density area is close to the elementary school, the public elementary down there. So,
Anything else to add?
No.
Okay. Number 6, industrial zoning is typically assigned for properties with sufficient access to major transportation routes and situated from residential zoning. Is there anything here at all that we need to cover?
Nope.
Nope. That's what I thought. Okay, any additional thoughts or comments? Positive, concerns, anything else to add?
I was just gonna say, like, RM zoning is not a good fit for every place, but I think this area it is, and then, kinda like we said, you say, oh, RM, you can just put whatever you want there. But that development agreement really does put a lot of control on what can be put in there and how much of each different zone. So I think this one is a really good fit.
you know, it's not particularly germane, but I do have a lot of appreciation for Mr. Hughes and the family legacy and how this has been a legacy property for 50 years. And I fondly remember burning fields because I was a kid sitting on the back of the pickup truck with a torch in his hand. And so I look back very fondly on those days, and I'm kind of sad that we don't have those big green spaces for grass fields.
Okay, anything else to add? If not, then I would look for a motion from capacity.
Phil, do we need to be recommending the development annexation agreement as part of any recommendation?
I don't think you need to, again, you're just making a recommendation on the zoning, so it'll move forward.
Okay.
And I think there's some edits to removing a
Make
section
anyway.
from the development agreement anyway, before it goes to council,
Okay.
so.
So I would move to recommend a mixed residential zoning and to move this forward to city council with that recommendation, finding that through our conversations and that it meets the criteria for a mixed residential zoning.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote.
Hampi,
Yes.
Schlauhauer,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Davis.
Yes.
Kimball,
Yes.
Carey,
Yes.
Stephenson.
Yes.
Okay, move forward to council. Item number 6 this evening, administrative and staff reports. Do we have anything to add?
Yeah, I did want to say that I did hear some of the comments about the lack of clarity as far as that zoning recommendation and the annexation request, and then I reread the intro paragraph of the staff report. And so I am going to work on getting that clarity, maybe a little bit more into intro and possibly with the notification. So we'll be working on improving on that, so I appreciate those comments.
Absolutely, very much so. Commissioner comments? Anything to add? Anything for the good of the order?
I think I would just like to add that I think it's really important that those of you who came thinking that this was an annexation request, go to the city council meeting and let them know how you feel, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. I think it's important that, that you let the city council, that you let all of us know how you feel.
Absolutely. I think the important thing to remember is that we're all trying to work through this together. And this is just kind of the first step of many, so to continue to stay engaged. So unless anybody else has anything else to add, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.